Hey, what's good, y'all? Same boy here, and we are doing another political ideology test. This one is 8 values, and I've taken it before, and I'll pull up the results that I've got from before, um, and we'll go over those and see what differences there are. And the thing is, somebody who obviously isn't shy about expressing my opinion about any and everything, including politics. But one thing I try to stay away from doing is flag waving or getting caught up in, idol worshiping. If somebody I think or a group or a movement has, good ideas, then I'm like, okay, I take the good, we'll try to buff that or try to incorporate that into my own understanding. And any of the negative stuff, the things that I, see as being insufficient, then I cast those to the side. But it's like no individual, no group, no philosophy or anything can completely summarize, the whole of human experiences or, the best way of life in any circumstance. Nobody's 100% wrong. Nobody's 100% right. It's just a matter of some people being a little more right on this particular issue. But I do just enjoy these also just for the curiosity factor of different scenarios being presented to you, and maybe you haven't thought about them before, or you're just at a different place in your life, so you'll have a different understanding of the issue and whatnot. So, it just continuously, bounces off all these different experiences and information, that help, hopefully helps you to really refine the way that you look at the world and the way that you engage with other people. Especially since politics is such a sensitive and polarizing subject now more than ever. So, but one more thing is that I've also done the Politiscales test, where I took that a couple times and then I compared the results. And Politiscales is so far my favorite test because it has so many more questions. I think it has almost like twice as many questions as like 8 values or some of the more popular political tests that have made the rounds. So, but in any case, 8 values. You will be presented with a series of you will be presented with a series of statements. For each one, click the button with your opinion on it. Got it. Question 1 of 70. Oppression by corporations is more of a concern than oppression by governments. Now, I mean, they both, have their, own ways in which they're awful, and they reinforce one another. That's how they've been able to, get away with the shit that they do. They are the cabal, of lizard people that are, pulling each and every string that they can to, maintain power. So I'm going to say neutral and sure because honestly, it's both. They have a, symbiotic relationship. All right. It's necessary for the government to intervene in the economy to protect consumers. Of course, you can't have any type of system as far as like economic planning. You cannot have a system that is 100%, profit motive or capitalism, and 100% central planning or some type of where everything is a worker co-op or ran by the people who are just working there. That's unsustainable. So I would do the slight agree. The freer the markets, the freer the people. Fuck no. We've been doing this free market, experiment and favoritism towards supply side economics or, trickle down economics as it was known. And it has been less than a trickle, and then we still get taxed on that shit, with so much interest. So the freer the markets, no. The freer the people, no. People are free when the material conditions that would make their lives sustainable and stable are tied to a wage that they can that basically it's presenting economic liberalism, this question, as if it equates social liberalism. That the ability of having the option of 50, 1,000 different flavors of Pringles and Hot Pockets, or, different shaving gels and whatnot is, equivalent to the same freedom that you have to vote or, exercise your right to, speech and everything. No, they're not the same. They're two completely different fields. And then one, definitely has an effect on the other. The less material conditions a person has, the harder it is for them to try to climb the ladder and find a place in this rigged society, or because all societies are rigged in some way. And it just makes it harder for you to get over. So strongly, it is better to maintain a balanced budget than to ensure welfare for all citizens. No. The welfare of people, even people that I disagree with or don't like, comes first. Having a balanced budget. First of all, our whole system, economic system, it's just a house of cards. It's just one, level of motherfuckers shaking down yet another level of motherfuckers to pay off the motherfuckers that were shaking them down. And it just goes up to different levels. It's such a small handful of people who really have enough wealth where they don't really have to give a fuck. Who really have that fuck you money. But in terms of I'm not saying that we shouldn't care and try not to balance a budget. What I'm saying is that oftentimes when it comes to stuff like Medicare for all, or trying to take privatization away from a lot of different industries, including the energy sector or prisons, is that this actually creates better welfare for society, better economic production, better stability, better cohesion, and all this shit. But it's traded off for the benefit of a handful of just grimy pieces of shit who don't care. So I'm going to say strong disagree. We can ensure the welfare of all citizens. Do a balanced budget. But even then, it's like this. I don't have this fetish over oh my god, every month the budget has to be balanced. That's bullshit. That's not how life actually works. Sometimes you got to go into debt and borrow credit. Sometimes you have to offer credit to other people so they can do their shit. So that way y'all can have a reciprocal that way you can have an ecosystem where y'all can continue to reciprocate, and initiate trade with one another. So yeah, strong disagree. Publicly funded research is more beneficial to the people than leaving it to the market. That's a strong agree. Because you take the smartphone, for example, and then you have, it's first of all, a lot of this technology is developed from the military, and we have a civilian military, a public military, as it were. It's a public institution in the United States, which means that it is funded by tax dollars. And so these are developed through the military and whatnot, but they are funded through the general public. And then they get scooped up by these private corporations who then, go all around the world to find the best place to manufacture and source their the raw materials that they need to develop the goods or their service. And then they sell it back to us. So we're paying, for our smartphone technology and, the internet, Wi-Fi and whatnot, multiple times over to private corporations, even though they were, developed in the public sector effectively. So publicly funded research is more beneficial to the people than leaving it to the market. Strong agree. Because then also the other incentive of corporations is profit. So the thing is, if you know that you can pull a profit or whatever, you only want to be around for 3 months, and the complaints and shit won't start coming for 4, 5, 6 months down the road, then fuck it, and that's okay. But if it's something that's more publicly funded, that's up to more, auditing, and there's different repercussions for fucking things up, et cetera, is more beneficial to the people because there will usually be a little more oversight in developing of the technology. Hopefully. So publicly funded research is more beneficial. Agree. We'll do slight agree, because nothing is 100%, right? Tariffs on international trade are important to encourage local production. I'm not going to sit here and pretend I know enough about trade to really say which one way is most beneficial. I mean, I feel like, once again, you can't be 100% protectionist. You can't be 100% globalization or globalized. You have to have a balance, and I'm sure it shifts. And the thing is, of course, it shifts. Just as the seasons change, just as resource availability changes, just as different players enter or exit the game, of international geopolitical affairs and whatnot. So, I'm going to say neutral unsure. From each according to his ability, to each according to his needs. Not quite. Just because, everybody has different abilities and whatnot. But I don't really feel like this question, I feel like this question is just a little too vague. And I don't want to leave, because it could be left open to, well, if you're not able to do this and you can't contribute in this manner, then you get less compensation or, whatever the fuck. And it's like, no, find a way for people to, add value, in their own way, so that way people can get what it is they need to keep their individual life stable, as opposed to trying to create this, this floor, this cast for people to fit in, where if you have any type of anything that's a little bit different, odd about you and you can't perfectly fit, then you're discarded or you're considered a lesser value. Or, in other words, ableism. So from each according to his ability, to each according to his needs. No, I think I would agree with it if it just said that, like, are you trying as hard as you can, or whatever contributions you can make, are they consistent and are they of a quality that's useful to other folks? Then I might agree. But in this situation, it's a little too vague. And given how, and given, when I do hear this sentiment, the context in which it's presented in, it's usually not a positive one. So I'm going to say disagree. It would be best if social programs were abolished in favor of private charity. Strongly disagree, once again, because, the goal of privatization, and I'm not mad at it in and of itself, is to generate profit. The issue is that I don't feel that privatization should be so widespread. I feel like there are certain industries or goods and services that straight up should never be able to, so that should never be privatized. Whether that's utilities, like water, or, food. I feel like people should get stipends for gas and whatnot. So, I think people should get stipends for a bunch of different shit, so many different credits for stuff. So, but once again, it's removing the profit motive from different areas of life will improve the quality of humanity in general. And I feel like that's across the board. So, strong disagree. I'll do light disagree. Once again, in certain times and conditions, private charity, I'm sure, will be more beneficial. Taxes should be increased on the rich to provide for the poor. In general, yes, but let's understand something about our tax system is that if you make, and I don't know the exact number, so I'm going to just use a general range. Let's say like $100,000 to like, $5 million or whatever, right? It's like, obviously you're doing really good. You're not living in poverty, but you're probably still, having to live month to month or whatever because of your expenses and whatnot. And then you don't get the benefit of the social safety nets. I don't think that's fair. I think still, even if you make $1 million, that, even people who make millions of dollars, that number fluctuates, which means that there's some people who enter it and just in it for maybe weeks or months or, a handful of years at a time. And I don't feel like just because you happen to be doing good once in your life, that means you should never get any assistance. I don't believe in that. And then the other thing is, if you're also somebody who's in that tax bracket range, is that you are making a good amount of money, but you're not making so much that you're able to like lobby politicians or like really stuff a bunch of it away on some, remote island or place where they don't cooperate with United States tax law and law enforcement extradition practices and whatnot. So then, like, the people who have buku dollars, the tens, hundreds, millions, billions of dollars, they are paying less taxes than people who are making like 30, 40 grand a year. Like literally, like not relatively, but overall they pay less taxes. Sometimes they even get credits like Amazon. So it's like, in general, yes. But really what we should be talking about here is that the super ultra wealthy, they need to be forced. They need to have their wealth literally fucking taken from them, because you can't just keep putting the burden on these people who do happen to, work really hard, saying do what they're supposed to do, quote unquote, get up the ladder, play the game and shit, and then you still hit them over the head for the price that they pay. You know what I'm saying? I'm not mad at somebody for making $500,000. You know what I'm saying? I'm just as mad as the motherfucker who's making like $500 million or has that much money and didn't pay anything in taxes and is telling everybody else that they need to donate to their nonprofit or their charity or something. It's like, go fuck off. You know what I'm saying? So taxes should be increased on the rich to provide for the poor. In general, yes, but if I would say this, I wouldn't have a problem with decreasing the taxes on people who are in that like lower 6-figure to 7, maybe even 8 figures tax range, in exchange for making the other motherfuckers, the ultra super 1% or whatever, have to pay their fair share. Because I feel like just making them pay their fair share would overshadow, you know what I'm saying, everybody else's, because they already hoard a disproportionate amount of the wealth anyway, right? So taxes should be increased. Slight agree, yes. Inheritance is a legitimate form of wealth. I'm gonna do slight agree. I'm not mad at inheritance of itself, but there's a limit. There's a threshold, and I have, my own idea of what that is, but in general sense, but I can't really say I put a number to it. But just like I believe that you should only be able to have so much money in general to your name, there's only so much money of your wealth that you should be able to pass down to your, through inheritance. I have no problem with that. So I'll do slight agree. Basic utilities like roads and electricity should be publicly owned. Strong agree. And then I would include stuff like phone service, or basically any type of telecommunications, which would include cellular service, Wi-Fi, internet access, all that good stuff. So, or even water, food and housing as well. So, but that's a whole other story. So, strong agree. Government intervention is a threat to the economy. Strong disagree. Nope. Sometimes you need what central planning can provide. Sometimes you need what only private companies can provide. Sometimes you need a worker co-op, you know what I'm saying, or guild, or some smaller, more localized network to get certain things done. Every situation is different. But in terms of government intervention being a threat, no, it's partly why you even have an economy, because that's what the dollar is backed off of, and that's what allows you to be able to exchange your dollars for, property and, any type of goods and services that you use in that respective, where that money is accepted. So strong disagree. Those with the greater ability to pay should receive better health care. I'm going to do a strong disagree, just because, of course, an obvious exception should be for stuff like cosmetic or life-threatening, type stuff. But beyond that, it's like, no, you shouldn't be able to cut in line, you know what I'm saying, for health. I mean, health, your body is your body, your health is your health. And I don't believe that anybody should be able to prioritize themselves or get priority because they have more money or because they know somebody. I don't give a fuck if it's like your brother, or your mother or something comes in. We got other people to take care of. You know what I'm saying? And as a matter of fact, I hope that, I would think that it'd be good to like avoid that conflict of interest that like the Hippocratic Oath, you should be able to provide the same quality of service, to every, citizen that comes into your facility. So those with a greater ability to pay, I'm going to just do the slight disagree because, I don't consider like either cosmetic or non-life-threatening stuff to be considered under the umbrella of healthcare. So I'm going to do strong disagree. Quality education is a right of all people. I agree. The means of production should belong to the workers who use them to a certain degree. It's one of those things that sounds really good in theory, but just like not all CEOs, not all people who happen to run hedge funds, not all people who, are self-described capitalists are, saying just greedy pieces of shit. Not everybody who calls himself a socialist or a communist has the best interests of other people at heart or is really thinking in a practical way. Not all workers, do what the fuck they're supposed to do. So then what ends up happening, and this can happen at any level, you know what I'm saying, just between you and 2 or 3 of your friends to, you know what I'm saying, millions of folks trying to coordinate, you know what I'm saying, protest or whatever the fuck, is that you have a situation where just because there's variation in human beings or whatever, right, in their vision and their motivations, that some people will naturally just start contributing more or less to certain efforts, you know what I'm saying, as different issues and stuff comes up. So then how do you go about making sure that everybody is contributing at the optimal level to keep things sustainable? So that way there's enough resources or whatever for anybody to come and, use them when you need them. Otherwise, there's always going to be a catastrophe of needing some shit that we don't have access to because this and that didn't get done or this and that didn't get secured. Well, then you have to have certain people who are going to end up enforcing that shit. And long story short is that what a lot of times people who say like, oh, the means of production should belong to the workers who use them and shit like that, they don't take into account that like not everybody gives a fuck and is going to be able to contribute in the way in which you're suggesting for this to be a practical, way of doing things. You could just a better example is blogs and stuff, or the administrators of different like group pages and blogs and whatever the fuck, right? Motherfuckers will come in, share, like, comment on or whatever, but very few people will volunteer for shit, or any nonprofit that you happen to know of or a charity, you know what I'm saying? Sometimes it's hard to get people, not sometimes, it's very hard to get people to volunteer their time for something, even when it's well compensated, to get them to consistently go in and do shit, because everybody is different. So, long story short, I'll do slight agree just because I think in these times we need more of workers, co-ops, unions, ownership, etc. The United Nations should be abolished. Nope. Military action by our nation is often necessary to protect it. Not really. I mean, this is the United States. We already meddle in too many people's shit. We have to back the fuck up. And the thing is like I always understand like the presence of the need to have a military. You know what I'm saying? The need to have intelligence gathering. The need to have, diplomacy and all this other shit. But the levels at which it's operating is just so beyond the pale of being reasonable. It's just imperialism, and that shit needs to be scaled back. So military action by our nation is often necessary to protect it. No. I mean, throughout the last century and some change, it has been completely unfucking necessary. I support regional unions such as the European Union. Slight agree. Once again, there's no... You want, ideally, you know what I'm saying? Because here's the thing. We don't really worry about when people are doing what the hell they're supposed to do or when people are doing the right thing. The question is always of creating these institutions or laws or questioning like enforcement, the justice system and whatever, is how do you confront motherfuckers who are doing wrong and or doing harm and are not willfully stopping it themselves? And basically it's what it comes down to is you got to have the means of putting people in check, different groups in check. And the thing is, sometimes it's going to mean just an individual going and checking another individual or, a group v group. You know what I'm saying? You have, of course, the same thing going on at the state levels, county levels. And I just think the European Union is just one level of that. It's a means of putting a check on certain powers and then granting, powers to... and then also granting powers to different groups of people. So it's a way to check this group of people over here and to bolster the power and privileges of this other one. And there's, and there needs to be checks internally as well as externally with, different groups of varying size and motivations and blah, 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 blah. Basically what I'm saying is that like, all facets of life, we kind of have to look at them like a parliamentary system in that no matter how small the presence is of a particular idea or a variety of something, it needs to be present at the table because that's really the only true honest way to have, to take full account of all the different, points of view and experiences, motivations of people in your society. So, slight agree. It is important to maintain our national sovereignty. Yeah, I mean, sovereignty in general. I mean, even though, of course, there's, countries and leaders that I think are not doing the right thing in my eyes. But once again, I'm basing that off of my own, moral system. And then even if I happen to be quote unquote, the thing is, even if I'm right, because I happen to agree with, find solidarity with other people in that respective nation. That's once again, this was one of those things where you got to change your own house, you got to change your own country and shit, like to a certain degree. If they ask for help or whatever, yeah, sure, if they want it, but it's like, sometimes you just have to like let countries and shit figure this shit out on their own and untangle, the knots that have been in their society, for however long. So, a united world government would be beneficial to mankind. Yeah, see, once again, it's a little too vague, and it's like, it's easy. It's really easy to think about my own morality, right? And be thinking that, like, yeah, of course I think I'm 100% right on shit until I feel, saying that I'm no longer right. And then I, change my opinion or whatever. I update it, right? But the thing is, if I were to talk to myself from 6 months ago or 2 years ago or 10 years ago, I'd have something to check those other niggas on as well. You know what I'm saying? So I think, like a united world government, nah, I think, nah, I don't, one thing, I don't think it's possible. And then secondly, I don't think that it's worth pursuing. You want cooperation. And I think through, those overlapping interests and learning to work in harmony with different peoples and understand their differences is a better way than trying to say that, okay, are we all 100% on the same page, or, say no dissenting opinion? I don't like that shit. I don't like that authoritarian type, communism type shit where, everybody has to be on the same page. Otherwise we're sending in the tanks. You know what I'm saying? Like, fuck that. Authoritarianism is authoritarianism. I don't care, if it's waving, a swastika or, a flag with a crown on it, or a don't tread on me, or whatever the fuck it is, or the hammer and sickle. So, a united world government would be beneficial? No. I don't know. Well, I'm going to say neutral and sure. It is important to retain peaceful relations than to further our strength. I slight agree, just because, once again, you do want to be ready to do offense at times. At times. You mostly want to play, it's not even playing defense, it's just being cooperative and peaceful and trying to be understanding of other people's needs and motivations. Wars do not need to be justified to other countries. Strong disagree. Well, hold on a second. Wars do not need to be justified to other countries. Okay, so I look at it like this. Just like individuals have their own interests, corporations have their own interests, co-ops have their own interests, states and political leaders have their own interest. And I understand that there are things that have to be done at the state level to secure, the type of lifestyle that I appreciate, stuff that I might not be willing to do myself, or may be disgusted if I learn the true extent of how dirty, the job is. But I will also say this, is that sometimes, see, once again, this kind of rings up that like authoritarian communist type shit. Because it's like you can only do this and that if you get permission from everybody else. And it's like, look, I'll let y'all know that, like, hey, I got beef with these motherfuckers and this for this reason. And if y'all ain't gonna ride with me, I'm still doing my damn thing. It's like, yeah, I'll get a temperature check or whatever. But if you got beef with somebody, you know what I'm saying? Whether that's just a local bully or whether that's a rival nation state, I mean, that's what drives the, motivations. And that's what it is. And of course, like I just said, it sounds like I'm being contradictory, but it's like, no, sometimes peace and cooperation ain't gonna always work, and you got to throw them hands, to different degrees. And so, if you're sitting around waiting for permission, then, then that's just showing the bully that it's just theater. That it's just a routine that you'll go through. You'll scream and shout and holler and do all this other goofy shit, performative shit, and they'll just let some time die down and then do it again. So now, sometimes you got to deliver the force. Military spending is a waste of money. I'm going to disagree. There's a lot of good technologies, like I mentioned, the smartphone earlier, internet, all types of different telecommunication technology, medical technology is developed. The military, should it be cut down because it's already spent on disproportionately spent on a bunch of bullshit, mostly contracts for like warships and planes and helicopters that either don't work or just sitting in a fucking warehouse out in the desert somewhere. So military spending is a waste of money. It's way out of proportion of what it should be. So I'm gonna say slight agree. International aid is a waste of money. I'm gonna say strong disagree. Just because of what I just said about our military being so outsized and us intervening in so many other nations and whatnot, international aid is really the least we could do. My nation is great. I mean, listen, there are certain privileges and amenities that I get in the United States, and there are some that I don't get from being in the United States. So I'm going to say neutral, unsure. Research should be conducted on an international scale. Yeah, of course. Governments should be accountable to the international community. Once again, I know this sounds so funny because a lot of people who know me are like, probably assume that like I'm like a socialist or a communist or whatever, or even like a social democratic socialist. I guess democratic socialist is what people call themselves or whatever. But here's the thing. I don't adhere to one strict particular political philosophy, even though I do consider myself, when you add everything up, I'm definitely way left of center. You know what I'm saying? Like I cannot, like the term liberal and whatnot, refers to somebody that is, to me, kind of right of center. Because to me, centrist is right of center. Because of just how much the Overton window has shifted over the last several decades. But it's like, no, but I very much am understanding of the criticism of authoritarian regimes that wave the flag of communism or socialism and really try to enact equal results, in all their, in different ways. They're trying to get everybody to fit in this particular mold, and anybody who dissented was disappeared and erased, from history. This just rings of that. Before you go and do something that you may know is right, you need to be held accountable to the international community. No, because sometimes the international community may be in cahoots against me, or they may not know something that I do, or because it's not really bothering them directly, they may not, feel like they can get involved, or maybe they're just too chicken shit and will just choose to appease, choose to appease somebody who is clearly authoritarian or totalitarian. So government should be accountable to the international community. I'm gonna do neutral and sure. It really varies. Even when protesting an authoritarian government, violence is not acceptable. Strong disagree. Because governments. No, sometimes that's all they understand, because that's what they use to enforce their shit. Yeah, there will be media savvy, there will be psyops, there will be cultural, dynamics reinforced and whatnot. But what it comes down to is that once you start going against that, they're not going to peacefully protest. You know what I'm saying? They're going to swat you the fuck down. Maybe do it in the dark, or maybe depending how much you piss them off, do broad daylight, mask off. So strong disagree. Sometimes overwhelming force is the only thing that it's the only thing that some motherfuckers understand. Just some motherfuckers. Whether you're dealing with an authoritarian government or just your neighborhood bully. My religious values should be spread as much as possible. So I'm a non-believer. I'm a non-religious person. I don't believe in like skepticism, an afterlife, or superstitious. I'm not superstitious at all. And so, do I want my values, let's just say, to be spread as much as possible? Yes. At the same time, though, I understand that it's not so much like, somebody saying they're a Buddhist or somebody saying they're a Baptist or whatever. It's about what they glean from it, and that a lot of people have been able to glean the positive facets of hell, I grew up, being taught Christianity and whatnot. And after a certain point, I just realized, I can separate these good parts from all this other bullshit, which happens to include believing that God exists. I don't believe God exists. I have no conviction. I just really don't have any conviction that there's any other force, that's working, outside of of humanity, or excuse me, not humanity, but just like the physical world in which I inhabit, which includes, my body and human civilization and the world, you know. So do I want my values to be spread as much as possible? Yeah, secularism, rationalism, not being superstitious, not being superstitious and whatnot. Sure, but I know that that's not inherently going to make the world a better place. Although I do think it will improve it to a significant degree. Our nation's values should be spread as much as possible. I'm gonna go neutral and sure, just because, like my values are my values, and of course, I think my shit is right. But every nation has conflicting values, just like every couple or family has different values that they squabble over and shit. So to say that our nation's values should be spread as much as possible, which values? Who's representing what values are being represented by the nation? So unsure. It is very important to maintain law and order. But exactly what does that mean? And the thing is that like my understanding of law and order, because of my experience in this country and observations, is that that's usually just code for enforcing harder policing, stricter policing towards poor, especially black and brown, but not only black and brown communities. They'll fuck up the right poor, white people if they know it won't really hurt their job and their reputation and whatnot. So is it important to maintain law and order? Look, I'm not an anarchist. Of course I want there to be police. I believe in security. I believe in surveillance. I believe in intelligence gathering. I believe in having a justice system and prisons and whatnot. It's just that the way that it's expressed and practiced, especially in the United States, it's barbaric and it's just throwing human lives, into the gears of a money-making machine, which benefits a handful of hateful pieces of shit of all colors, all backgrounds. So it's important to maintain law and order. Law and order doesn't mean social harmony. I think that's actually the best way to put it. The maintenance of law and order does not equal social harmony. You need other shit going on in a society or going on in neighborhoods and whatnot to maintain a stable society and cohesion. The general populace makes poor decisions. What does the general populace mean? The people who don't have a bachelor's degree, the supposed smartest motherfuckers in the room who run the banks or run, all these different, businesses and institutions and shit, and then they got to be bailed out every fucking decade because they just gamble with the world's money, with working people's money, and yet they couldn't manage, to put something away. So now you got the fucking Cheesecake Factory and shit telling them that, like, yeah, all the CEOs and shit padded their pockets and got their shit sitting in, like, non-liquid assets or in, like, a Cayman Islands account or something like that. But that the local, stores, franchises and everything probably are really, even if they make, like, $250,000 a year or something like that, it's like they still live paycheck to paycheck. They still live month to month, So the general populace makes poor decisions, No, fuck you. You will never, like, the poor hardworking people are, the people who would otherwise have the most foresight, have the most discipline, organizational skills, if they could just get the basic shit they need to have a stable life. So the general populace makes poor decisions. Fuck you. I'm gonna do soft disagree. Because having less education and less, knowledge and experiences, that's a disadvantage in everything. But there's other trade-offs, to having to work under the conditions of just being in desperation. So, victimless crimes such as drug use should not be crimes at all. Strong agree. The sacrifice of some of the civil liberties is necessary to protect us from acts of terrorism. I will do a slight agree just because, like I said, I do believe in surveillance. I do believe that you need to invest to some degree of preemptive crime reduction and whatnot. I just think it's safe to say a lot of the methodology that has been used, whether it's broken glass window policing, or whether it's just the over-policing of poor, primarily black and brown neighborhoods, you know what I'm saying, all that shit. It's like that's you know, it's like that's, I mean, you can separate the two. One thing doesn't automatically lead to one another, because no matter what rules are on the books or what code of ethics and guidelines there are, customs, whoever happens to have that authority and can grant authority to other people to use, that's the issue. So it's really about the, you know, it's really about and listen, I'm not just saying like, oh, if you swap out one bad apple, it'll fix everything. What I'm saying is that, like, you know, like, it may be a whole fucking bushel of apples, but each of those apples are individuals. You know what I'm saying? Groups are made of individuals. Institutions are made up of individuals. And you can, you know what I'm saying, swap enough motherfuckers out to where if more of them are following the rules than not, that would improve conditions quite a bit. But anyway, the sacrifice of some civil liberties is necessary to protect us from acts of terrorism. Slight agree. Government surveillance is necessary in the modern world. I would say that I think any government, it's effective, whether or not I agree with it, that it's effective if you want to maintain your power and whatnot, to know what the hell is going on in your society and who may want to try to usurp power from you or undermine you. So it's you know, I just take necessary not as a signifier of being good or bad, but just what is effective or efficient. You know what I'm saying? As a nation, as a leader of a state or a nation, the very existence of the state is a threat to our liberty. I don't know if I should slight disagree or slight agree. Liberty? No, because, well, once again, every country, every society has different ideas of liberties, right? Now, once again, because I live in the United States, I enjoy quite a few liberties, but it's more so that I enjoy, like, conveniences and, like, consumer options, which actually doesn't really give me liberty. It gives me the illusion of choice. You know what I'm saying? Because it should be, you know, healthcare should be as easily accessible. Housing should be as easily accessible. Food, you know what I'm saying, should be, you know, readily available. Those are what grant me liberty, because that's what gives me the ability to, okay, once I have those parts of my life taken care of, then I can start thinking about, you know what I'm saying, other ways that I can invest in myself, invest in my community, in my family, and make long-term decisions. To me, that's my idea of liberty. To me, liberty isn't, oh, just being able to walk around with a gun, or being able to just, you know, or not, and then not simply being able to use drugs freely. I mean, that's one part of it. But it's really a fairly superficial one. But the very existence of the state is a threat to our liberty. No, because sometimes, depending where you're at, the state is what gives you liberties that otherwise you wouldn't have. So I'm going to say neutral and sure, just because it varies. Regardless of political opinions, it is important to side with your country. No, I don't do nationalism. I don't do any type of adherence to one particular group or identity or clan or whatever the fuck. Anybody can be wrong, whether it's at an individual level, the group level, the nation level, whatever. So strong disagree. You got to always be ready to dissent from the dominant position. All authority should be questioned. Strong agree. A hierarchical state is best. No. Is hierarchy inevitable? Yes. But we should not be trying to maintain just one form of hierarchy that as legitimate. I don't believe in that. So a hierarchical state is best. I disagree with that, but acknowledge that, like, hierarchy is just going to happen. Hierarchy happens for a multitude of internal and external reasons. It is important that the government follows the majority opinion, even if it's wrong. No, once again, this is, and even though this is more of an example of like so this is like what, so this is an example of like, we got a plurality, or we have a majority opinion or a plurality, pluralism, direct democracy, where nope, hey, we have 51 people, you know what I'm saying, versus 49 or whatever. We have a majority. You know what I'm saying? We're going to start, you know what I'm saying, playing tennis, using baby kittens. And it's like, no, no. Just because you represent the majority doesn't mean you get to decide what is right or wrong. This is sometimes, you know what I'm saying, when you need the minority to be loud and push back as hard as fucking possible. Because you got to push back against that shit. having a majority opinion doesn't mean isn't necessarily good or bad. So it is important that the government follows the majority opinion, but then even if it's wrong, no, fuck no. No, fuck no. Strong disagree. The stronger the leadership, the better. What does that mean? I'm going to say neutral, unsure, because it's like, what does that mean? There's no, because actually I'll look at it like this. I'll break it down like this. Stronger, you know what I'm saying? Whatever that happens to mean to you, and whatever facets that means to you, no one leader or individual or group is going to attain all of the values and all of the insights that are needed to be a good leader. At least not 100% of the time. I think the greatest quality, because to me, the greatest strength that a leader can have is flexibility and humility. So I'm going to say neutral and sure just because I already know that's not the dominant opinion. Democracy is more than a decision-making process. I agree. It's more of a set of like cultural expectations and conditioning. And hell, even our democracy. And here's the thing: we don't live in a direct democracy. It functions more like a representative democracy, and really a plutocracy with all the financial corruption from corporate lobbying and rigging and shit like that. But really the other term that should be put in front of that is means-tested democracy, which basically means means testing just means if you meet certain criteria, then you pass and you are given, you know what I'm saying, this, and that. You pass your citizen test, then you're able to become a citizen as long as you pay all the fines and do this, and blah, 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 blah. You know what I'm saying? You're able to pass a drug test or whatever and not come off as a complete fucking idiot during an interview, you get the job. And then in this society, it's like, oh, you're able to make enough money to buy food? Yeah, you have the option of enjoying all of our wonderful groceries. If not, get the fuck out. You're more than welcome to starve on the street. So democracy is more than a decision-making process. Yes, it is a set of cultural expectations and signifiers. And then even in the United States, as well as in most places, we don't have a direct democracy. We don't even have just a representative democracy. We have a means-tested democracy. The more you have, the more money you have, the more better networking you have, you know what I'm saying, the better charm that you have or whatever, the more democracy that you are granted. Environmental regulations are essential. Strong agree. A better world will come from automation, science, and technology. Not inherently, because the other side of that is you still have to have human beings be able to fit into this. You know, otherwise, if you have all this automation, advanced science, and technology, the analogy is so, you know, saying blatant on the nose, but I mean, it has to be said that then you just have a situation where it's the Matrix, you know, which is really just a more advanced technocratic, you know, state of what we already have, where so much of our life is lived through simulated experiences, and that these are the conditions that help facilitate that, because you have advanced technology and science and whatever, and quote unquote technological progress. But culturally, economically, socially, politically, things have, you know, regressed so far back that human beings are left susceptible to the very technologies and whatnot that we came up with to help to improve society. So it's a neutral unsure, because it's very context heavy, because that's such a vague question. Children should be educated in religious or traditional values. Now, we only live in one timeline, and so we have, you know what I'm saying, we can look at human history as we know it and look at what has been considered traditional religious values throughout time. Now, at no time that I know of has atheism or non-spirituality or even like Gnosticism or like a paganism been like the dominant, as far as I know, has it been like considered a traditional or even a dominant religious value? You know what I'm saying? And no, I don't count Buddhism either, just because it's not based around it's not based around the supernatural deity. Supernatural deity. But I will say this: what if we did? What if we were living in a time where my values were the dominant one, the traditional ones? Or what if I had the opportunity to pass down those values? I think I would want children to be at least familiar with them. You know, because it's like, Because the thing is, if I think about it, like, just like Christian families, Catholic families, excuse me, want their kids to go to specific schools or whatnot, more secular people, we want that shit to be absent from the schools. It's like sometimes because you know of all the different opinions and how susceptible people can be, you want to inoculate your children and everything, basically from being able to change their mind. You want them to be able to carry on the torch. Children should be educated in religious or traditional values. Here's what I'll say to that. Should there be private religious institutions for you to be able to, focus on that? Yes. But that should be completely absent from public education when it comes to public education. And I believe that it should be overwhelmingly public education that is well funded and whatnot. And that public institutions should be free of not free of exposure to different religious and traditional ideas, but it should be more of in a cultural historical context as opposed to like a very personal or quote unquote spiritual one. That'd be something you have to go look at at home or a private institution. So should children be educated? I'm gonna say neutral, unsure, because this is a little too vague. If it's in a public institution, no. Private institutions, yeah, you should be able to do that. Traditions are of no value on their own. Strong disagree. Sometimes you want to pass certain shit on. Actually, you always want to pass certain shit on, and that's kind of the greatest difficulty. Is that how do you teach somebody who hasn't been through the same shit as you how to pass on the same values? Religion should play a goal. Wait. Traditions are of no value. No, I disagree. Religion should play a role in government. Strong disagree. I do not believe in theocracy. I don't like the presence of, I don't even like the fact that most politicians are out and out religious people. To me, I feel like, that should be to me, that's like a deal breaker. Like you can't go and work in the public sector, if you are so adamant about expressing religious views. Yeah, have them or whatever. Express them to some degree and shit. But, yeah, there's a lot of shit that I would shut down. There's a lot of shit that I would shut down if I had things my way in terms of like the overlap between state and religion, states and religion, public spaces basically, and the practice of religion or spirituality. Churches should be taxed the same way other institutions are taxed. I strongly agree. Climate change is currently one of the greatest threats. It is the greatest threat. Because without a fucking climate, to actually for humanity to thrive in, all this other shit doesn't matter. So strongly agree. It is important that we work as a united world to combat climate change. Yes, society was way better many years ago than it is now. No. And the thing is that no. I mean, obviously there's so many, it's so contextual, but straight up, it's like, even though progress and going forward in time doesn't automatically mean things are getting better, once again, the context that we do actually have, no, I would say that society is better in many ways, if not for the fact that we're really confronting a lot of the reasons why, and asking the question of why and analyzing why the perception that society was better so many years ago when it benefited a much smaller subset of people and excluded large numbers than today. So strong disagree. It is important that we maintain the traditions of our past. Once again, this is the neutral and unsure. Whose traditions, which past? Because it's like we don't want to fetishize. You don't want to fall into the trap of like over fetishizing progressivism and always just changing things up and just looking to the future and quote unquote being on the right side of history, unquote. But then you also don't want to get too nostalgic and think that only returning to things to how they were, if that's even possible, is the way that life should be. So neutral and sure. It is important that we think in the long term beyond our lifespans. Yes. And the thing is, I know a lot of people, they only care if it has to involve, I started thinking outside of myself once I had kids, or once I caught enough cases, or once I, so-and-so died in my life and was no longer there, or whatever. And it's like, look, I'm not here to say that people are, and listen, I'm not going to say that, because that's what it took for you to, kind of wake up or whatever. We all have shit that kind of needs to, a kick in the ass for us and make us really kind of see things differently. So I'm not going to shit anybody for that. But, actually, let me go back to that. But it's like, just in general, you also don't even know how long you're going to live. You know what I'm saying? And so, I can say that, like, as somebody who's 31, yeah, there was a time I didn't give a fuck about shit, but as time goes on and I realize, like, you know what? If I'm going to be on this earth longer, I want things to be a little more decent. And then the thing is, from that point, it's not even much of a stretch to be like, you know what? Other people coming after me should be able to enjoy, what this world has to offer. Just as I've been able to enjoy this or that. So it is important we think beyond our lifespans. Yes. Reason is more important than maintaining our culture. Disagree. And the example I want to use of this is that, like, I just brought it up earlier of this sarcastic dismissal of always being on the right side of history. There was a time when being progressive meant implementing eugenics because, you didn't want people with certain deformities, whether it was mental or physical or, so you didn't want certain cultural expressions and you thought that they could just be eradicated. That was considered progressive at a certain time. You know what I'm saying? It's not something that was only used by, like, fascists or right wingers or whatever. It's used by people who have a very shallow understanding of humanity and think that, you can only use it. All you got to do is use reason. All you got to use is skepticism. Or no, it's you got to be just really sensitive to all cultures. No, fuck that shit. It's a mixture of multiple things. It's not just one thing. Sometimes reason is what you need as the best guide in society. Sometimes you need more cultural, references. Sometimes you need something else. It could be, there's many different facets, tools that we have, as human beings in order to alter our fate and alter this world that we inhabit. So reason is more important than maintaining our culture. I'll be unsure because some cultures are, anti-intellectual or pseudo-intellectual, and then some cultures foster, intelligence or scholarly ambitions, which happens to include certain religions like Catholicism and Judaism. So, So drug use should be legalized or decriminalized. Strongly agree. Same-sex marriage should be legal. Yes. No cultures are superior to others. Ooh, I'm going to disagree with that. I am not a cultural relativist. There are some cultural practices. Hell, even within other left-wing political parties, there are some cultural practices and signifiers which really rub me the wrong way, and I would like to see put in the dustbin of history. Just as much as I would like to see the same of, like, fascism and Nazis and whatnot. So, no, disagree. I'm definitely not a cultural relativist. Sex outside marriage is immoral. Strong disagree. If we accept migrants at all, it is important that they assimilate into our culture, to a certain degree. Once again, what facet of culture? Obviously, certain level of language adaptability. Obviously learning the laws and like I already said, I'm not a cultural relativist. There are some things that I'm going to want to be abandoned. And that's not even just with immigrants. There are plenty of U.S. citizens, natives, whose cultural practices I fucking despise. So if we accept migrants at all, I'm from that, I'm gonna go ahead and say, no, I kind of like the fact that because no one culture society has all the answers. And so I like the fact that, so we get influenced by these other motherfuckers whom they choose not to change or they can't change or just choose to push against it for whatever reason. So I'm going to say neutral and sure. Abortion should be prohibited in most or all cases. Disagree. Gun ownership should be prohibited for those without a valid reason. What's a valid reason? And then also, it's like, yeah, of course, like, especially in places like Los Angeles or New York, I don't want everybody just being able to walk around with a goddamn rifle and a handgun just because from simple misfiring alone, could cause, enough, more accidents and fatalities than I think is acceptable. So, and it's, I don't know. I don't know. I honestly don't know the answer at this point with the whole the gun ownership thing. It's like, yeah, do I believe in the right to own a gun? And of course, every context is different. I guess my issues is more so with, like, types of guns and the availability of, like, certain types of like ammunition and whatnot. But I guess that's a little more nuanced. I guess like in general, like gun ownership should be prohibited for those without a valid reason. Yeah, and I guess I could say that like a valid reason means like would include like, I don't think it's so much that like you need to present a valid reason, but like doing the background checks, doing the waiting period, doing the training. I feel like, I don't know if there is already like auditing, you know, saying that like, oh, they just pull up on you, you know, saying one day to just make sure that your shit is being stored and maintained correctly. Different stuff like that. Like I understand that shit. You know what I'm saying? Because once again, I'm not somebody who's so gung-ho about like, my freedoms. Like, no, because sometimes in certain individuals exercising their freedom is just taking up, because some people exercising their liberty is the erasure of other people's liberties. So gun ownership should be prohibited for those without a valid reason, or to those whom no, because that's different than the caveats I just listed. So I'm gonna say disagree. I don't think you need like a quote unquote valid reason, but there are means that we should have in order to invalidate somebody from having access to firearms, or easy access to firearms. I support single-payer universal health care. Yes, bitch. Yes. Give me that free health care. Give me that free drip. Prostitution should be illegal. Strongly disagree. Sex work is work, and then whatever consenting adults want to do with their bodies is whatever the fuck they want to do. People can sell water to one another. You know what I'm saying? We can sell, life-sustaining medicines and whatnot to one another. You know what I'm saying? We can get into these arrangements where we can pass our wealth and belongings to anybody that we happen to name in a will. But if you choose to help somebody out financially in exchange for sex, all of a sudden that's immoral, and all of a sudden that's immoral. You know what I'm saying? And is illegal, deserving of punishment from the group, from society, for acts that you engaged in with another consenting individual. Adults, excuse me. Other consenting adults. Because somebody under the... To me, I feel like... I mean, 18 really is an arbitrary age, because it's just when we assume people are out of high school, but it's like, there are plenty of people, you know what I'm saying, you're still very easily manipulative and very stupid, you know what I'm saying, up until like your mid-20s, because that's when like parts of your brain that help you rationalize shit are fully formed. Not to mention all the experiences and conditioning and education that you got up to that point. But that's a whole nother tangent. Prostitution should be illegal. Strong disagree. Maintaining family values is essential. No, a family is not the only valuable social unit. It's not the only one. You can not have a good family, whatever, but have many other, good relationships and still have an impact on society, or vice versa. So maintaining family values is essential. I'm going to do slight disagree, just because, families are important, but it shouldn't be like, if you don't have a traditional, type family structure, then there's something wrong with you, or you're dysfunctional somehow. There's plenty of dysfunctional, quote unquote, traditional families. To chase progress at all costs is dangerous. Yes. Once again, this is the fetishization of wanting to always, quote unquote, be on the right side of history. So you don't do things that are consistent with being human in the moment. You think about what looks good on paper. You're thinking beyond humanity, but because you want to be admired for supposedly expressing a higher form of consideration for other people's humanity. Whether you're aware of that dynamic or not. So to chase progress, and plus the example I gave of what it meant to be progressive at a time. There was a time when to be progressive was to support, women's rights, feminism and whatnot, but only for white women. You know what I'm saying? Or to support at least women's rights in name or whatever, but still not give them the right to vote, you know what I'm saying, or the ability to make a living in different industries. So to chase progress at all costs is dangerous. Or hell, even developing a vaccine, you know what I'm saying, for a disease or a virus or whatever the fuck. It's like, hey, we could fast track this if we just got to use, live, abandoned babies, you know what I'm saying, human babies. So I'm gonna say neutral and sure. It just varies. genetic modification is a force for good, even on humans. I will agree, just because on one hand, I don't have a problem with stuff like genetically modified organisms. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't have a problem with like GMO chickens. I have a problem with factory farming, you know what I'm saying? And how animals are, the animal cruelty that follows as a result of that. I don't like the fact that there's stuff with all these, you know, antibiotics and shit like that. And it's like, yeah, all these things are part of the genetic modification. But I'm not mad at them of themselves. It's more about how they're, you know, executed. You know, because I mean, hell, let's take a less charged issue like a tomato or whatever, right? So, Monsanto can generate or has developed, you know, genetic modification to where you have to buy their seeds because after one use, they will no longer germinate. They won't create plants that will germinate seeds. Obviously, that's fucked up. On the other side, genetic modification also includes stem cell research and how people have been able to, you know what I'm saying, literally regrow limbs or glands or different parts of their body and shit. And just, you know, helping to give them a little more dignity or higher quality, slightly higher quality of life than they would have, you know, normally had. So, is it strictly a force for good? Is it a force for good? No. Is it strictly a force for good? No. It's iffy just like everything else. We should open our borders to immigration. I mean, we already, like, if they're saying that, like, oh yeah, everybody just come in without any type of vetting, no. Obviously, you need some type of vetting process. We also need to think about what the fuck it is we're doing that's causing so many people to be immigrating or emigrating, you know what I'm saying, no matter what. So, should we open our borders to immigration? I don't know. Once again, it's like we have a procedure, we have laws and everything that on the books looks pretty reasonable, right? But it's all about who happens to be in charge, and who has, and what's at stake for the individuals in charge. So we should open our borders to immigration. I'm going to say neutral and sure. Governments should be as concerned about foreigners as they are about their own citizens. No, I mean, it's like, are other citizens human beings? Yes. Do I believe like international aid and coming to, you know, help people that, you know, saying on occasion depending on the situation? Yes, of course. You know what I'm saying? Solidarity and of course political, social solidarity with different, you know, groups and individuals throughout the world. Yes, all of that. But should every government be looking at non-citizens with the same level of attention and investment as non-citizens? I don't agree with that. So they should be concerned about it. Slight disagree. All people, regardless of factors like culture or sexuality, should be treated equally. Strong agree. It is important that we further my group's goals above all others. Nah, just because it's like, yeah, as an individual, of course you think that you're 100% right in that moment. But just think of the next person who comes in charge, who is able or who has the most leverage and taking up the most space, has the mentality that my group above all others. That's a big problem for everybody else, including me, if I'm on the outside. Because then that means I just have to either be always be resisting them or have to capitulate, you know, saying towards them. I much prefer the parliamentary idea, which is that different groups, based on their size, that's their voice represented in the decision-making process and whatnot. So it is important that my group furthers my goals above all others. Neutral and sure, my group, you know what I'm saying, it isn't, it's fluid and it fluctuates and we're not 100% right and don't contain all of human experiences. So neutral, unsure. What is this? Libertarian socialism, which, I mean, that's exactly what I got before. That's exactly what I got before. So I'm gonna go ahead and save this. So here's the first time I did it on the right, and then here's the next time I did it on the left. I've actually taken it more than just a couple times, but I some of the recordings didn't come out too well. But it's interesting because I think I took this less. I mean, this is less than like a year ago that I took this. Maybe not even full 6 months. But in any case, you can see that even though I still on the left here, even though I still got libertarian socialist, which will go down to how they describe that, which we'll look into the definition of that in a little bit. But in terms of the different factors, so they use the 4 axes, which is a usually pretty popular way of breaking down people's political identity. And once again, political skills, I feel like, surpasses a lot of these tests because, not only is it more than just 4 axes that they kind of use to help you determine your political identity, your political ideology and whatnot, it also has like almost twice as many questions. I think there were like 140, 150 questions. So it just gives you more scenarios and gives you a much more nuanced understanding of where your political compass happens to be. And see, this is one of the reasons why I like PolitiScale so much, because it has, this test has 70 questions. I'm pretty sure it had like maybe like 130 to 150 questions. So almost twice as many questions. And so with that, they give you more axes to determine your political ideology beyond just these 4, because most political tests that I've seen tend to use these same axes to kind of break down your political ideology. But in any case, let's dig in. So on the right, the first time that I took this test, my economic axis tilted towards socialist, which is the same case here, except the first time it was 83% in favor of a socialist, or central planning government, or central planned economy that serves to benefit the citizens, the workers, more than private interests. This time it was 77.6%, with 22% in favor of the markets. Yeah, I mean, I don't, I do believe in prioritizing the citizens. I tend to actually look at it like this. It's less about, just giving people what they want and making the people fed and happy and shit, and more so that this is the way I break it down. I tend to look at it as nobody should be able to go around and get their second plate until everybody's got their first plate. So that's the way I look at it. But I'm not mad at people being able to make a profit. I'm not mad at millionaires in and of themselves. I don't like the fact that billionaires exist. And as a matter of fact, I don't think I really like the idea of 100 millionaires existing. But people who just happen to become rich and shit, I'm not mad at that. Once again, value is arbitrary. People don't choose. Most people who come up and whatever, they don't choose to pay themselves that much shit. They get that from, playing the game and whatnot, whatever respective space they happen to be in. So that's a little more geared towards the markets, but about 6-7%. So it's still overwhelmingly socialist. Diplomatic axis. Dipset. Should have had an ad-lib for that. The diplomatic axis. The first time it was labeled as internationalist, with 76%, which means the other 24% was nationalistic, or prioritizing the interests of my nation. This time it was almost 10% difference, where I'm peaceful, I want to get along and shit with the rest of the world for the most part, about 2/3 of the time, right? And maybe 1/3 of the time, I'm going to be like, hey, this is just what I like, this is what I want. If that's a problem with you, all right, we'll hash that out, but I'm going to do what I do. You know what I'm saying? It's like you still, say it, because the thing is, even if you say my interest is to go around, quote unquote, spreading democracy, or at least helping out pro-democracy movements and shit, then that still means you're enabling the strife, the conflicts within other countries and whatnot, because that is what you believe is more beneficial for people who have a certain, who share your values and ideas. And that's just what it is. Nobody's going to give you space. You're going to have to go and take it yourself. So take up that fucking space. The civil axis, or, basically liberty versus authority. Whatnot, right? It says it right here. I don't know. I don't know why I was trying to find some other terms or phrase or some poetry to make it. But this is more or less the same. The civil access, liberal versus authority. They were within a few percentage points of it's over 2/3 in favor of being liberal, or basically. This is where like my libertarianism comes in, because when it comes to stuff like, these are the questions of like, oh, should people be able to be, whatever sexuality they want, use whatever drugs they want, be able to engage in consensual sexual activity, you know what I'm saying, do your own little small private, you know what I'm saying, cliques and clubs or whatever? Yes, yes, and yes. And should you be able to do stuff that may be an inconvenience or annoying to people to a certain degree? Yes. And then, you know, around 30% or just a little bit less than that of the time is when, no, you got to respect authority and respect the will of other motherfuckers, even if they're in the minority, even if you are the majority. So that's how it breaks down. And then socially, and actually this is probably actually more relevant with the thing of sexuality, is no surprise, it's progressive. The first time it was very progressive. This time it was just progressive, and wow, almost 10 percentage points. And but see, that's the thing that I like is as you take these tests and whatnot, right? And you take them again and again and again, the tests are not 100% the same when you take them. So you're not going to be taking them in the exact same order. And the hell, some tests, once again, that bring up political scales, they sometimes introduce questions in there that sometimes certain runs through the political scales test will give you randomized questions. So not every question will even come up through each trial of the test. And this is good because it really keeps you on your toes and really doesn't allow you to just answer stuff in a way that's going to give you the same result. Now, this just so happened, you know, because I happen to have a pretty strong idea of my politics and understand that they kind of fluctuate given how things develop and how, you know, different input, different experiences, alter my perception. And so, yeah, so that's that. So according to 8 values, libertarian socialism is the political ideology that most closely matches my answer to their questions. Libertarian socialism. And then just to get a more concrete definition of what that is, I'm going to go ahead and bring up libertarian socialism. So, libertarian socialism has many different names, and then also just socialism in and of itself has so many different names, and it's gone through so many different variations. You know, socialism is not just one thing, which is so funny when I hear people saying they're like, oh, this is socialist or this isn't socialist. Socialism is not one thing. But libertarian socialism is described as, it's also known as socialist libertarianism, socialist anarchism, stateless socialism, anarcho-socialism, anarcho-socialism. But basically, it is anti-authoritarian, anti-statist, libertarian, that rejects socialism in the form of centralized state control of the economy. Now, obviously, I already mentioned that I don't have a problem with central planned economy to a degree. And then oftentimes you need that for stability because private interests, have less incentive to care about the public. But overlapping with anarchism and libertarianism, they criticize wage-labor relationships within the workplace, emphasizing workers' self-management and decentralized structures of political organization. So actually, yeah. So yeah, even though I'm not as critical with the centralized control of the economy, I'm still generally very critical of the state and, very much think that we need decentralized structures of political organization, which is also known as dual power, or just setting up, institutions, infrastructure, and whatnot that can make up for what the government or the state or corporations fail to provide. Libertarian socialism often rejects the state itself and asserts that a society based on freedom and justice can be achieved through abolishing authoritarian institutions that control certain means of production and subordinate the majority to an owning class or political and economic elite. And with that, libertarian socialists advocate for decentralized structures, yes, based on direct democracy and federal or confederal associations. So cooperatives, citizens' assemblies, trade unions, workers' councils, and stuff like that. Yeah, in those situations, yeah, direct democracy. Once again, to a degree, you don't want every decision, needing a plurality, a majority of people in order to get it passed. A form and socialist wing of left libertarianism, past and present political philosophies and movements commonly described as libertarian socialists include anarchism, collective anarchism. Basically, it's very closely related to anarchism, but all these different like prefix names like collectivist or green or individualist are the nuances of it, right? Left communism, libertarian Marxism, yeah. So, you know, basically, it's like, yeah, people should be able to do what they want for to a certain degree. We need to have different levels of institutions and whatnot that have to answer to their constituency on different terms, and that the value that is created from labor should first go to benefit society and maintaining harmony for peoples and giving them their needs to go about their life and live their best life. So, yeah, so that's it. So that's 8 values. According to them, I'm libertarian socialist, and I encourage all people to take these tests. And I will be doing another one that will be very interesting, and I'll just wait until I actually post it for y'all to find out. So talk to you later.